Once upon a time, there was a CEO, a man who had it all. Or at least that's what people thought. His name wasn't important to him, nor did it matter to anyone else. He had built his company from the ground up, with countless hours of hard work, sleepless nights, and sacrifice. He had all the material wealth he could ever dream of, a grand office in a towering skyscraper, a sleek car that turned heads, and a lavish penthouse that looked out over the entire city. But despite his success, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. He had climbed the corporate ladder, but in doing so, he had let personal relationships slip through his fingers. His work consumed him, and while his colleagues admired his drive and his results, no one really knew him. People would call him to congratulate him on a deal or a successful merger, but when the call ended, he was always left alone. His days were filled with meetings, emails, and strategies, but his nights were long and quiet. It wasn't always this way, though. There had been a time when he had loved life beyond work. He had once been the kind of person who looked forward to weekends, who cherished dinner with friends or spontaneous trips to the countryside. But somewhere along the way, those moments had slipped away. He became so consumed with his business that he didn't have time for fun, or for anything outside of his work. Over the years, people drifted away. Friends got married, started families, and built lives of their own. His closest relationships turned into fleeting acquaintances, and his social circle shrank. What hurt the most was that he didn't even realize how much he missed human connection until it was too late. He would spend his evenings in his penthouse staring out at the glowing city lights surrounded by luxury, but feeling emptier than ever. He could buy anything he wanted, but none of it could fill the hole inside him. The loneliness crept in slowly, a constant companion that hovered over his every decision, yet he never spoke about it. How could he? He was a CEO, a man of success. Who would understand? One day, while attending a social event for business leaders, he had a conversation with an old college friend. The friend was married, had kids, and seemed to be thriving in every aspect of his life. As they talked about their past, the friend mentioned how his life had been made complete by his family, and how his wife had introduced him to the idea of a work-life balance. "You need to get out there," his friend said casually. "You need someone by your side." The words stuck with him. They echoed in his mind for days. A few weeks later, when he was having another drink alone in his penthouse, he got an unexpected call. It was his best friend, who had been urging him for months to step outside of his work bubble and find someone. "I think I've found the perfect woman for you," his friend said, a tone of excitement in his voice. "She's beautiful, successful, and exactly what you need in your life." The CEO, who had always been skeptical about dating, especially after hearing countless stories of relationships that had fallen apart in the midst of busy careers, wasn't so sure. But the idea of finding someone, of having someone to share his life with, lingered in his mind. "Maybe it was time. I don't know," he said, still unsure. "What if it's just a waste of time?" "Trust me," his friend urged. "She's a model. You'll be impressed. I know you need this." Despite his doubts, the CEO found himself agreeing. He could do this. It would be simple. Meet a beautiful woman, enjoy a nice dinner, and maybe find something real in the process. He made arrangements to meet her the following Saturday at an upscale restaurant, one of the best in the city. The location was exclusive, the kind of place where only the wealthiest could be seen. The CEO made sure he wore his best suit, the one that made him look like the powerful, successful man he had become. As the day of the blind date approached, he couldn't help but feel a mix of curiosity and excitement. He'd been so focused on his career for so long, and while he wasn't sure about dating, he knew something had to change. Maybe this blind date would be the beginning of something new. Maybe she would be the one who could fill the void he'd been feeling for so long. The night arrived, and the CEO, with his usual poise, entered the restaurant. It was as if the city's lights had dimmed for him. The bustling crowd of well-dressed people, the soft jazz music playing in the background, the clink of glasses, it all felt so foreign to him. He was used to the hard negotiations of boardrooms and corporate settings, not intimate encounters like this. But tonight he had put aside his doubts and focused on the possibilities. He arrived early, as was his habit, and took a seat by the window. From where he sat, he could see the entire city sprawled beneath him, twinkling in the night. He found himself staring at the view, lost in thought, wondering if this could be the start of something meaningful. His eyes wandered back to the door every few seconds, his heart racing in anticipation. Minutes passed, and he started to feel a sense of impatience creeping in. Was she going to show up? Maybe she had changed her mind. He glanced at his watch, then looked around the room again. The restaurant was buzzing with activity, and yet he felt isolated, like the last man left in a crowded space. His eyes returned to the door. Any moment now, finally, he saw her. A woman walked in, her figure elegant and graceful, moving with an air of confidence. She had the poise of a model, and for a moment the CEO thought he had found the woman his friend had described. But something felt off. She wasn't quite what he had imagined. Her clothes were simple, nothing extravagant, but she had a certain charm about her. She wasn't dressed in the latest fashion trends or wearing heavy makeup like the models he had seen in magazines. Her eyes were warm and welcoming, and there was something refreshing about her presence. She looked different, authentic, unpretentious. The CEO stood up as she approached, feeling a sudden wave of uncertainty. Was this really the woman his friend had set him up with? He expected someone flashy, someone who could match his lifestyle. Instead, he saw someone who seemed out of place in his world. But as they greeted each other, something changed. The woman wasn't bothered by the opulence of the restaurant, nor was she intimidated by his status. She smiled at him with a genuineness that took him by surprise. She wasn't here for the expensive meal, the fine wines, or the luxurious setting. She was just here for the conversation, for the chance to get to know someone without any pretense. It wasn't what the CEO expected, but in that moment, he realized that it might just be exactly what he needed. The CEO wasn't sure what to expect as the woman sat down across from him. He had anticipated meeting someone glamorous, someone who would dazzle him with her beauty and sophisticated demeanor. But instead, the woman sitting before him was nothing like the high-maintenance model he had envisioned. She was dressed simply, yet in a way that made her stand out. Her hair was pulled back into a modest bun, and she wore minimal makeup, her natural beauty shining through. She wasn't concerned with impressing him, and in that moment it felt as though she was a breath of fresh air. The CEO studied her for a moment, unsure of how to react. She didn't seem nervous, unlike many women who were intimidated by his wealth or his title. In fact, she seemed completely at ease, as if this was just another dinner in a long line of conversations she had. It made him feel strangely self-conscious. Here he was, a powerful CEO, and yet he couldn't help but feel like he was being stripped of all his facades by her calm, unaffected presence. He watched as she smiled warmly at him, her eyes sparkling with genuine curiosity. The initial awkwardness between them quickly faded as they started talking. She asked him questions about his work, but not in the way most people did. She wasn't interested in his position or his success. She wanted to know who he was beyond the title. And for the first time in a long time, the CEO realized that he wasn't used to being asked these kinds of questions. Most people only cared about what he could do for them, not about him as a person. Yet here she was, interested in what made him tick, not what he could offer her. As they spoke, he started to feel a connection he hadn't experienced in years. She wasn't just another beautiful face trying to climb the social ladder. She wasn't interested in using him to further her own agenda. She was real. She was down to earth. It was a stark contrast to the women he had been around for so long. Women who had pretended to be interested in him but were only focused on his bank account, his title, or his connections. He learned that she wasn't a model at all. In fact, she wasn't what he expected in any way. She was a single mother, working 2 jobs to make ends meet. Her life wasn't filled with luxury or glamour. She lived in a modest apartment with her young child, and every day was a struggle to provide for her family. But there was something in her eyes, a quiet strength that captivated him. She didn't speak about her struggles in a way that sought sympathy. Instead, she spoke with pride, explaining how she did everything she could to ensure her child had a better future. Her story was so different from his own. He had grown up with privilege, with everything handed to him on a silver platter. He had never known what it was like to worry about paying bills or making ends meet. His world was filled with high-end restaurants, luxury cars, and 5-star hotels, while hers was centered around caring for her child and trying to make every dollar count. It wasn't a life he could easily relate to, but he found himself intrigued by her resilience and the way she carried herself with such dignity despite the challenges she faced every day. They spent the next few hours talking about everything and nothing. It was the most honest conversation he had had in years. She spoke openly about her experiences as a single mother, the challenges of juggling work, raising a child on her own, and trying to find time for herself. The CEO in turn shared his own struggles, but in a way that felt more vulnerable than he had ever allowed himself to be before. He realized that for the first time in a long time, he wasn't hiding behind his status or wealth. He was just a man, sitting across from someone who saw him for who he truly was. The evening passed quickly. Neither of them seemed to notice the time slipping away. It felt so natural, so effortless. The CEO couldn't remember the last time he had felt this comfortable with someone. When they finished their meal, they continued talking, even as the restaurant began to empty out. She made him laugh, not with jokes or witty one-liners, but with the way she spoke about life. She had this warmth about her, a genuine kindness that made him feel at ease. She wasn't trying to impress him. She was just being herself. As the night drew to a close, the CEO felt a strange sense of reluctance. He didn't want the evening to end. It wasn't just because he enjoyed her company, but because he felt something deeper, something he hadn't felt in years. It was more than attraction. It was a connection, something that went beyond surface-level chemistry. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was playing a role. He wasn't the CEO, the man with money and influence. He was just a person, sharing a moment with someone who saw him for who he truly was. When the date ended, they stood outside the restaurant. The CEO offered to call a car for her, but she declined, explaining that she had already arranged for a ride. They exchanged a few more words, and then, as he watched her walk away into the night, he felt a pang of longing. There was something about her, her authenticity, her strength, that stayed with him long after she was gone. The CEO walked back to his car, his mind racing. He couldn't stop thinking about her. He didn't know what it was, but something about her had struck a chord in him. It was as if she had peeled away all the layers he had built up over the years and seen the man beneath, the man who had been buried under the weight of his career and his success. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was just a CEO. He felt like he was someone who could connect with another person on a deeper level. As he drove home, he thought about his life. It had been filled with accomplishments and accolades, but it had also been empty in many ways. He had focused so much on his career that he had neglected the most important thing, human connection. Meeting her had reminded him of what he had been missing all along. He didn't know what would happen after this date. He didn't know if they would see each other again or if this was just a one-time thing. But he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't let this moment pass by without trying to explore it further. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could have something real. Something that wasn't based on what he could offer, but on who he truly was. The CEO couldn't stop thinking about her. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her warm smile, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her son, or the way she laughed, soft and genuine, as they shared stories. It had only been one evening, but it felt as though something had shifted within him. He had spent so many years focused on business, on achievements, on numbers. But now, after just a few hours with her, he realized how little he had actually experienced in the way of real, meaningful connections. He thought about their conversations. They had talked about everything: family, their childhoods, their dreams for the future, and of course her life as a single mother. She had never complained about her circumstances. Instead, she spoke about them with a sense of purpose and pride. She was doing everything she could to build a better life for her child, and it was clear that her little one was her world. That kind of dedication was something the CEO admired deeply. But what struck him the most was how she didn't need him. She didn't need his money or his status. She wasn't interested in him because of who he was professionally. She was just interested in him. The idea of someone seeing him for who he was, not for what he had, was something entirely new. He had spent so much of his life trying to prove himself to others, trying to gain their admiration. But here she was, not needing any of that. As the days passed, he found himself looking forward to their next conversation. He had texted her a few times just to check in, to see how she was doing. Each reply from her was filled with warmth and honesty. He could tell she wasn't just being polite. She was genuinely interested in getting to know him, just as he was interested in her. She had an authenticity that made everything about their interaction feel real. Not like the superficial exchanges he was used to in the corporate world. There was something about the simplicity of her life that grounded him. She didn't have the same kind of luxuries that he did, but she seemed to appreciate the small things more deeply. A sunny afternoon in the park with her son, a good book to curl up with when the world became too overwhelming, the sound of her child's laughter filling the house. These were the moments she cherished, and it made him wonder how he had become so disconnected from the simple joys of life. After a few weeks of texting and occasional phone calls, they finally made plans to meet again. This time the CEO suggested a casual outing. Nothing extravagant, just a walk through a local park and a stop for coffee afterward. He didn't want to overwhelm her with another fancy dinner or lavish date. He just wanted to spend time with her, in a setting where they could talk without the pressure of pretenses. The day of their meeting, he found himself unusually excited. He was used to being the one in control, the one who organized every detail of his life, but with her it felt different. He was going into this with no expectations, just a genuine desire to get to know her better. He arrived at the park early, the morning sun casting a soft glow over the trees and benches. He waited by a fountain, his hands stuffed into his jacket pockets, trying to hide his nervousness. When she arrived, it was as if the world around him fell away. She was dressed casually in a simple sweater and jeans, but there was something about her presence that made her stand out. It wasn't her clothes or her appearance. It was the way she carried herself, the ease with which she navigated the world. She was grounded, and that groundedness was magnetic. She waved when she saw him, a big smile on her face. The CEO found himself grinning back, a feeling of warmth spreading through him. For a moment, he forgot about his usual worries, the endless meetings, the pressure to perform, the expectations of his company. In that moment, all that mattered was her. They spent the next few hours walking through the park, talking about everything and nothing. It was the most relaxed he had felt in ages. There was no rush, no agenda, just the joy of being in each other's company. He listened as she shared more about her life, about the challenges she faced as a single mother and the sacrifices she made every day to ensure her child's future. She didn't ask for sympathy, though. Instead, she talked about it as though it were just another part of her story, something that had shaped her into the person she was today. For the first time in a long time, the CEO realized how much he had taken for granted. He had always assumed that wealth and success were the ultimate goals in life, but this woman showed him that there was so much more to living than just climbing the corporate ladder. The simple moments, like a walk in the park, a quiet conversation, or a shared laugh, held more meaning than any deal or acquisition ever could. They stopped for coffee at a small cafe near the park. The CEO, who had spent years dining in upscale restaurants with the most exquisite menus, found himself enjoying a simple cup of coffee more than he ever thought possible. She ordered a cappuccino and he opted for an espresso. As they sat at a small table sipping their drinks, they continued to talk. She asked him about his childhood, his dreams before he became a CEO, and how he felt about the fast-paced life he had built. The conversation wasn't about business. It wasn't about his success or his future. It was about who he was as a person. It was about his passions, his fears, and his regrets. He spoke more openly than he had in years. She had this way of making him feel comfortable enough to share things he had buried deep inside. She didn't judge him, didn't try to fix him. She just listened. By the time they finished their coffee, the CEO felt like he had uncovered a part of himself that had been hidden for so long. He had spent so many years building a life that looked perfect on the outside, but on the inside it had been empty. Now, for the first time in years, he felt like he was starting to rediscover what truly mattered: connection, authenticity, and simplicity. As they parted ways, the CEO couldn't help but feel a sense of contentment. They didn't kiss goodbye, nor did they make any promises about seeing each other again, but there was a quiet understanding between them. He knew that this was the beginning of something, even if he couldn't quite define what it was. He had learned that real connection didn't need to be rushed or forced. It unfolded in its own time, in its own way. Over the next few weeks, they continued to meet up whenever their schedules allowed. Their meetings were never rushed or extravagant. They kept things simple, spending time together in ways that felt natural. They would take walks, grab coffee, and sometimes just sit together, talking about their lives or the world around them. The CEO found himself looking forward to these moments more than he had looked forward to anything in years. With every passing day, he realized more and more that he didn't want to return to the life he had lived before. The world he had created for himself, filled with wealth, luxury, and status, seemed hollow in comparison to the life she was showing him. She had something he had lost along the way, the ability to live fully in the present, to appreciate the small moments that made life meaningful. As he sat in his office, staring out the window at the city below, he thought about the path he had been on. He had always defined success by the numbers, his company's growth, his financial achievements, his position in the corporate world. But now he wasn't so sure that was the right way to measure his life. Maybe success wasn't about the size of his office or the value of his investments. Maybe success was about finding happiness, about connecting with others in a way that made him feel whole. And in her, he had found that connection. As the days turned into weeks, the connection between the CEO and the woman grew stronger. The simple moments they shared, whether it was a walk through the park or a quiet conversation over coffee, began to mean more to him than anything he had experienced in his lavish, fast-paced life. He had once believed that happiness came from success, from achievements, from the validation of others. But now he realized that true contentment wasn't something that could be measured by the size of his office or the balance in his bank account. It was something far more subtle, something he had been missing all along. They had come to know each other slowly, layer by layer, without the pressures of expectations or preconceived notions. She wasn't looking for him to fix her life, nor did she expect anything from him. She was content with her life as it was, focused on raising her son and doing what she could to make sure he had a better future. But even so, the CEO couldn't help but feel drawn to her resilience, her strength, and her unwavering determination to make the best of every situation. In contrast, his own life had been filled with excess, yet there was a sense of emptiness that lingered in the background. He had spent so many years chasing success, building his company into something impressive and accumulating wealth. But now, after spending time with her, he began to see how shallow that pursuit had been. It had taken him away from the things that truly mattered: human connection, kindness, and simple moments of joy. He often found himself thinking about her son, about the life they were building together. She had taught him something that no business deal, no partnership, and no amount of wealth ever could: how to live with intention, how to appreciate the present moment, and how to find joy in the little things. She didn't need extravagant gifts or luxurious experiences to feel fulfilled. Her happiness came from her ability to make the most of what she had, to show love and care to her son, and to find contentment in the small victories of everyday life. One evening, as they sat on a bench by the water, watching the sun dip below the horizon, the CEO found himself opening up in a way he never had before. They had been talking for hours, and the conversation had turned to family. She shared stories of her childhood, the struggles she faced growing up, and the dreams she had for her son. She talked about how she wanted to give him everything she hadn't had, how she wanted him to grow up knowing that he could achieve anything he set his mind to. "I want him to see that he doesn't have to settle for anything less than what he deserves," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I want him to know that he's capable of so much more than what the world might expect of him." The CEO listened intently, feeling something stir within him. There was something incredibly powerful in her words, something that resonated deeply with him. He had spent so much of his life thinking about what he deserved, what he had earned, but hearing her talk about her son, about her hopes for him, made him realize that there was so much more to life than personal gain. For the first time in a long time, he started to think about what he wanted to leave behind, what kind of legacy he wanted to create. It wasn't just about building a successful company or becoming a name people recognized. It was about making a difference in the world, about being someone who had a positive impact on the people around him. He thought about her son and how he would grow up with a mother who loved him unconditionally and worked tirelessly to provide for him. He thought about how much her love and dedication would shape him into a person of substance, someone who valued kindness, hard work, and resilience. In that moment, the CEO realized that he wanted to be a part of that. He wanted to contribute to her life, to be there for her and her son in whatever way he could. It wasn't about fixing anything. It wasn't about changing her life or solving her problems. It was about being there for them, supporting them and showing them that he cared. Their relationship was still new, but the more time they spent together, the more he realized that he was falling for her. It wasn't just because she was kind, or because she was strong, or because she had a way of making him feel seen and understood. It was because she was real. She didn't try to impress him, didn't put on a mask to make herself seem more important. She was simply herself, and that was more than enough. One afternoon, as they sat together in a small cafe, sipping tea and talking about their dreams for the future, the CEO looked at her and felt a surge of emotion that he hadn't expected. There was something in her eyes, something that told him she cared for him too. He wasn't sure when it had happened, but somewhere along the way, he had come to realize that he wanted to be with her, not because of what she could offer him, but because of who she was. It was a thought that both thrilled and terrified him. He had spent so much of his life guarding his heart, building walls around himself, afraid to let anyone in. He had been hurt before, and he had convinced himself that it was easier to stay distant, to focus on his work and avoid the vulnerability that came with relationships. But now, as he sat across from her, watching the way she smiled and listened so intently, he realized that he didn't want to live his life that way anymore. He wanted to take the risk. He wanted to open his heart to her, to see where their connection could take them. And yet a part of him was scared. He was used to being in control, used to knowing exactly what would happen next. But with her, he wasn't sure. It was all so new, so uncertain, but somehow that made it feel even more right. As they left the cafe, walking together down the street, the CEO found himself lost in thought. His heart was racing and his mind was filled with questions. What if it didn't work out? What if their lives were too different? What if his world of wealth and luxury was too much for her to handle? But as he glanced over at her, at the way she carried herself with such grace, he knew that those questions didn't matter. What mattered was that he was here, in this moment, with her. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel the need to control it. He was willing to let it unfold, to see where this connection could take them. As time went on, the connection between the CEO and the woman continued to grow, and with it, his understanding of what truly mattered. He had spent years chasing success, accumulating wealth, and building a life that others admired. But now, he was starting to see the cracks in the life he had built. It wasn't just about the business deals or the corporate victories anymore. It was about something deeper, about human connection, about love, and about making a real impact on the people around him. In the months that followed, their relationship deepened. The CEO found himself becoming more and more drawn to her. Her strength, her resilience, and her ability to love so deeply and so unconditionally. He had never experienced anything like it before. He was used to relationships that were transactional, where people saw him for his title and his success, but with her it was different. She saw him for who he truly was, beyond the facade of power and wealth. She didn't care about his money or his status, she cared about him as a person, and that was something he had never truly experienced. They spent more time together, finding small ways to connect in their busy lives. Whether it was sharing a quiet evening at her apartment, taking a walk through the city, or simply talking about their hopes and dreams, they found joy in the simplest moments. The CEO began to realize that these were the things that truly mattered, the small everyday moments that made life worth living. He had been so focused on the future, on the next big deal, on the next big accomplishment, that he had missed out on the beauty of the present. She continued to teach him what it meant to live with intention. He watched how she put her son first, how she worked tirelessly to provide for him, and how she managed to find happiness even in the most difficult circumstances. She didn't have the luxury of living a life of excess, but she had something far more valuable: gratitude for what she had, and a deep love for the people around her. The CEO admired her more than he could express. She was the kind of person who made the world better just by being in it. She didn't need to be recognized or celebrated. She simply went about her life with grace, doing what she could to make a difference in her son's life and in the lives of those she cared about. Her kindness and authenticity were things the CEO had long forgotten about. His life had been so consumed by work, by the pursuit of wealth, that he had lost sight of what really mattered. He realized that he didn't want to keep living in the way he had been. He didn't want to be the man who defined himself by his career and his material success. He wanted to be the man who valued the people in his life, who took the time to truly connect with others, and who appreciated the beauty of the everyday moments. And as much as he had tried to keep his feelings at bay, he realized that he was falling in love with her. It wasn't a grand, dramatic revelation. It was quiet and subtle, like the way the sun rises each morning without fanfare. But it was real and it was undeniable. One evening, as they sat together on the rooftop of his penthouse watching the sunset, the CEO turned to her and finally found the courage to say what had been on his mind for months. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," he said, his voice softer than usual. "About my life, about what I've been chasing and what really matters." She looked at him, her expression calm but attentive. "What do you mean?" "I've spent so much time focused on building my career, on success, on things that I thought would make me happy," he said. "But the truth is, I've never felt more alive than when I'm with you. I've never felt more at peace." Her eyes softened and she reached out to take his hand. "I know what you mean," she said quietly. "We spend so much time worrying about the future, about what we need to achieve, that we forget to appreciate the present." The CEO nodded. "I've been so caught up in the idea of success, in the idea of what I'm supposed to have, that I didn't realize that the most important things in life are the people we love and the moments we share." He paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. "I've realized that I don't want to keep living this way. I don't want to chase success for the sake of it anymore. I want to build a life with you, to be present, to be a part of your world, and I want to be there for you and your son in whatever way I can." Her expression softened and she gave his hand a gentle squeeze. "I'm glad to hear that," she said, "because I feel the same way." The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment neither of them spoke. It was as if the weight of the conversation had settled over them, and they both understood what it meant. The CEO wasn't just talking about their relationship. He was talking about his life, about the changes he wanted to make. He wasn't going to keep chasing after something that would never bring him true happiness. He wanted something real, something that was built on love, trust, and the small moments that made life worth living. Over the next few months, their relationship grew even deeper. The CEO continued to make changes in his life, focusing more on what truly mattered and less on the things he had once prioritized. He spent more time with her and her son, getting to know them both better. He learned about the small joys of family life, about the way her son's eyes lit up when they played together, or the way she would laugh when he tried to make her dinner. These were the moments that mattered, the moments that made life truly meaningful. The CEO also began to open up more to her about his own fears, his own struggles, and his own dreams. He realized that he had kept so much of himself hidden for so long, afraid to be vulnerable, afraid to let anyone see the real him. But with her, it felt different. She made him feel safe, and for the first time in his life, he felt like he didn't have to prove anything. As their relationship continued to evolve, the CEO began to see a future that was different from the one he had once envisioned. It wasn't about running a successful business or accumulating more wealth. It was about building a life together, creating a family, and being there for the people he loved. It was about love, not power. It was about finding joy in the simple moments, and about being present in each other's lives. One day, as they sat in a quiet park, watching her son play with a ball, the CEO realized that he was truly content. He wasn't just happy because of the relationship he had with her, though that was a huge part of it. He was happy because he had found something he had been searching for all his life: meaning, purpose, and connection. He had found a woman who had shown him what it meant to live with love, intention, and authenticity. And for that he was grateful. He looked over at her, smiling as she laughed at something her son had said. He knew that this was where he was meant to be. The world of wealth and success no longer held the same allure. What mattered now was the love they had found, the family they were building, and the moments they shared together. And in that moment, he knew he was exactly where he needed to be, right there, with her, building a life that was as real and as beautiful as the love they shared. The change that the CEO had begun to feel in his life wasn't just about the time he spent with her or the decisions he was making regarding his career. It was about something deeper, something that went beyond material success or even romantic love. For the first time in years, he began to truly appreciate the simplicity of life. The small, everyday moments, the ones that so many people took for granted, were becoming the things that mattered the most to him. Their relationship had been blossoming quietly without fanfare or grand gestures. They weren't rushing into anything. Instead, they were letting their bond grow organically, finding joy in the small, ordinary things that had once seemed insignificant to him. The walks in the park, the shared cups of coffee, the quiet moments spent together with her son. It was all becoming more precious than any achievement or success he had ever known. She was teaching him what it meant to truly live, not in the future or the past, but in the present. The CEO had spent years living in a constant state of ambition, always chasing the next big thing. He had learned how to navigate the world of high-stakes business, how to be tough, how to push through the challenges that came his way. But no one had ever taught him how to appreciate the quiet moments of life, the ones that didn't come with any awards or recognition. And now, with her by his side, he was learning. One evening, they were sitting in her apartment, her son having long since gone to bed. The CEO found himself simply watching her as she sat on the couch reading a book. It wasn't anything extraordinary. She wasn't doing anything to impress him or to be noticed. But in that moment, he realized how much he loved being in her presence just as she was. No pretense, no expectations, just the quiet beauty of being together. "Do you ever think about the future?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. She looked up from her book, meeting his eyes with a gentle smile. "I think about it sometimes, but mostly I try to live in the moment. The future can be overwhelming, you know." He nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. For so long he had been obsessed with the future, always planning, always looking ahead. But now, sitting there with her, he realized that the future wasn't something to fear or obsess over. It was something that would unfold in its own time. And if he lived his life with intention, with love, and with authenticity, the future would take care of itself. "I'm starting to think that maybe I've spent too much time worrying about things that don't really matter," he said, his voice thoughtful. "I've spent so much time focused on building something that I didn't stop to appreciate the things that are right in front of me." She closed her book and set it down on the table, looking at him with an understanding that went beyond words. "It's easy to get caught up in what we think we need," she said. "But sometimes the most important things are the ones we already have." For the first time in a long time, the CEO felt truly seen. She wasn't trying to fix him or give him advice. She was simply acknowledging his feelings, offering him the kind of understanding that only someone who truly cares can offer. It was a feeling he had never experienced before, and it was a feeling he didn't want to lose. As they sat there in silence, the weight of their conversation sinking in, the CEO realized that he didn't need to be anyone other than who he was. He didn't need to prove himself to anyone. He didn't need to constantly strive for more. What he needed was to embrace the life he had, to be present in every moment and to cherish the people who truly mattered. And for the first time, he understood that the people who truly mattered weren't the ones who admired his wealth or his success. They were the ones who loved him for who he was, flaws and all. In the days that followed, the CEO continued to reflect on everything that had changed in his life. He had started to take steps toward simplifying his life. He was spending less time in the office and more time at home. He was spending more time with her and her son, finding joy in the quiet moments they shared together. He had begun to prioritize the things that really mattered, his relationships, his well-being, and his happiness. But he knew that the biggest change was internal. He had always been so focused on the external markers of success, his career, his wealth, his status. But now he realized that the true measure of success wasn't about what you had or what you accomplished. It was about how you lived, how you treated the people around you, and how you made them feel. And in that moment, he knew that he had found something more valuable than any deal or accomplishment. He had found love, connection, and purpose. Her influence on his life had been profound. She had shown him what it meant to live authentically, without the need for validation or approval from others. She had taught him that happiness didn't come from wealth or status, but from the simple, everyday moments of life. She had reminded him that love was about giving, not receiving, and that the most important things in life weren't things at all. They were the people you cared about, the relationships you nurtured, and the joy you found in the present moment. The CEO knew that he was different now. He was no longer the man who defined himself by his job or his success. He was someone who valued the simple pleasures of life, someone who understood that true happiness came from connection, love, and authenticity. He knew that he had a long way to go, but he was ready to continue this journey with her by his side. One night, as they were walking home from a dinner, the CEO took her hand and looked at her with a smile. "I don't know what the future holds," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "But I do know that I want to be with you. I want to build a life with you, one that's real, one that's grounded in love and trust." She looked at him, her eyes soft with affection. "I want that too," she said quietly. "I want to build something real, something that lasts." In that moment, he knew that no matter what the future brought, they were on the right path. They weren't rushing toward anything. They were simply living, loving, and enjoying the journey together. And as he walked beside her, he felt a sense of peace and contentment that he had never known before. For the first time in years, the CEO felt like he had everything he needed. He had found the thing that had been missing in his life all along: love, connection, and a sense of purpose. And with her by his side, he knew that the best was yet to come. Life with her had brought a sense of peace to the CEO that he had never known before. Everything felt different now. The usual rush of business deals, the constant juggling of meetings and targets, had faded into the background. His once obsessive need to control every aspect of his life had loosened. Instead, he was finding joy in the small moments, moments that didn't require any special planning or recognition. These were the moments that truly made life worth living, the moments he had missed for so long while chasing success. Her presence had transformed him, but it wasn't just about her. It was the way she had shown him a new way to live. She didn't need anything from him, not in the way that others had. She didn't care about his wealth or his power. She cared about him, and that made all the difference. Their relationship was built on honesty, trust, and a shared understanding of what truly mattered. They spent more time together, often just enjoying the simplicity of each other's company. The CEO had come to appreciate the rhythm of her life. It was nothing like his. There were no grandiose meetings or fancy events, but there was a sense of purpose in everything she did. Every moment seemed intentional, every decision driven by the love she had for her son and the life she was building. She didn't take things for granted, and that reminded him of the things he had overlooked for so long. Their bond deepened in the most organic way. There were no high expectations, no rush to make grand plans for the future. They lived in the present, enjoying the quiet moments they shared, savoring every conversation, every shared laugh, and every look that spoke volumes. It was easy and it felt right. One afternoon, the CEO found himself thinking about the future, not the business future, but the personal one. As he sat in his office, staring at the city skyline, he reflected on the path he had taken in life. He had spent so much time thinking about what he needed to achieve, but now he was starting to think about what he wanted to leave behind. The business deals, the money, and the accolades had once seemed like the ultimate measure of success. But now, as he thought about it, he realized that true success wasn't about what you accumulated. It was about what you gave, how you loved, and how you made the people around you feel. She had taught him that. She had shown him that there was so much more to life than just striving for more. She had helped him rediscover what it meant to live with intention and purpose. And as he sat there looking out at the world he had built, he knew that his priorities had shifted. The things that once felt so important now seemed insignificant in comparison to the love he had found with her. He had never considered what it might mean to truly settle down, to build a life with someone in a way that was about more than just companionship. But now he was beginning to imagine a future that included her and her son. The idea of family, of building something lasting and meaningful, felt more real to him now than ever before. They hadn't discussed the future much. They didn't need to. Their connection was enough, and they both understood that the future would unfold as it was meant to. But the more time they spent together, the more he realized that he wanted to be a part of her life, not just in the present, but in the years to come. One evening, as they sat together on the couch in her apartment, the CEO couldn't hold back the words that had been on his mind for weeks. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice quieter than usual, "about us, about what comes next." She looked at him, her expression warm but not surprised. They had talked about many things over the course of their relationship, but this felt different, more serious, more real. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice gentle but curious. "I don't want to keep going through life the way I was before," he said. "I don't want to keep pretending that success is the only thing that matters. I want to be a part of something bigger, Something that's built on love, not on achievements or status. I want to be with you, and I want to be there for your son. I want to build a life together. The words were out before he even realized he had said them, but they felt right. He wasn't just talking about the relationship he had with her. He was talking about a deeper commitment. A commitment to a life that was rooted in love, not in the pursuit of more. She reached for his hand, her fingers brushing over his with a tenderness that made his heart swell. I've been thinking about the same thing, she said quietly. About how much we've grown, and how much we've learned from each other. I think we're ready to take the next step. He smiled, feeling a weight lift off his chest. It wasn't about grand gestures or big decisions. It was about the quiet understanding between them, the knowledge that they both felt the same way. They were ready to take the next step in their lives together,